This is One United Body, Jane Johnson, Bill Brady, on May 25th, 2020, dialoguing together on the topic of examples of bigger picture scrolls. I'm going to go through a list and talk about different scrolls. Go ahead, Jane.
Yeah, welcome everyone. And just as we're waiting for others to come, we want to do this by encounter, not academic knowledge. So we want to do it with the power of the Spirit. As Paul says, not wise and persuasive words. So just begin to open all your gates of your spirit, soul, and body, just to receive the fullest blueprint, to be open to what God wants to share and speak to your life. And some of the spirit gates are revelation, intuition, fear of the Lord, hope, faith. So it's just really imagine that there's like all these little doors in your spirit, and you just push them open and say, I step into hope, faith, fear of the Lord. I invite and recognize my intuition as valid. And your mind, your will, your choice, your emotions. You activate them all and say they're all valid in hearing from God. Any little unction, any little quickening of the Spirit is God speaking to you, of which if you step on it, it becomes stronger and stronger, and you're more sure that God's spoken to you. It's so important that you actually step and acknowledge as a word from God, instead of, oh, I might have made it up, it probably isn't right. Then the flow continues, and your assurance of what you're hearing grows. So we've got some very big things to share today. Really an update on the big picture as well, from so much revelation we've had flooding as to how the big picture has grown. And we want to say really that we acknowledge fully anything that anyone has been doing. Actually, anything that you're doing, living works for God, is an awesome thing. And not to be discouraged and say, well, I spent all these years doing this, what a waste of time, because this should have been it. It never works that way. We're always on a journey of seeing a bigger and bigger picture, and everything compounds in terms of our learning, our understanding, and is still valid for the earth. So we honor everything that anyone has ever done. I mean, we ourselves have worked at the lower blueprint. And so, we're not dishonoring that in any way. It's just we seem to be in a period of latter days where the big picture is absolutely exploding before us, and we're being asked to have a role in the latter day big picture. And it's an immense privilege and honor, and someone has to fulfill these immense scrolls to bring in the full new earth for everyone, and to end the corruption of the earth and the suffering that is happening on a big scale. So this is why to be excited by this big picture, not intimidated, not feeling it's too much for you. I'll just go back to what I know. It doesn't matter what age you are, God is calling all sorts and all sorts of educational backgrounds. You don't have to be a qualified theologian for this. It is calling the childlike, the simple, the ones that want intimacy. It's a very exciting time because it's open to all. And before we get into the detail, just one quick word from Father, who's been speaking the last few weeks about becoming a living sacrifice, and there's such importance on that. So do begin to ask, in what way can you become a living sacrifice? We want to start as well. We've been doing this journey, Bill and I, for many, many years now. We have a lot of testimonies, encounters, hundreds and hundreds of hours of bench encounters with immense mandates. We've done, our pages are looked by hundreds of thousands of people around the world for quite a few years now. And we personally have had a couple of health testimonies we want to share today, because we're currently on a journey of understanding more about living out of the resurrected body and how our bodies can be completely renewed. And Bill has an amazing testimony in a couple of things he's had health-wise about renewal. Do you want to share that, Bill?
Sure, thank you. I had a point in my life during which I was collecting the names of medical specialists on my cell phone. The list was getting longer and longer, and the list of medications was getting longer and longer. The list of diagnoses, plural for diagnosis, was getting longer and longer. Point being, I was up to over 10 prescription medications per day, plus over-the-counter stuff for hay fever kind of thing. And there came a point at which I came entirely off of a round of medications for one particular medical issue that I was struggling with, which was acid reflux, which you might think of something minor, but my situation was to the point that I was losing my voice and unable to do my job, and had to go to voice therapy, 2 different rounds of voice therapy. So getting healed to the point at which that I was off of multiple acid reflux medications, and today where I'm able to eat spaghetti, and if any of you have any knowledge of acid reflux, you know that tomato sauce is something that's going to definitely be on your list of things that you would limit. I didn't have tomato sauce for probably a decade, and I can actually overeat on spaghetti now and not have a major issue, just a minor issue, because I overate, but not because of not the kind of thing I was having before, where I would actually lose my voice for a period of time. And the other thing was Parkinson's disease, and I actually came off of 3 medications for Parkinson's disease, no symptoms whatsoever any longer. Came off of allergy medications, but even came off of over-the-counter allergy medications. In fact, I'm to the point now where I'm simply taking a couple vitamins every once in a while, and that's it. Absolutely nothing, not even Tums. So major.
How long's that been
healing
now?
Yeah, major healing. And I realized, Jane, afterwards, because I do have some other things. For example, I'd love to get rid of my eyeglasses, and I'm believing for that. But my overall desire was not so much for the healing as it was to get rid of the prescription medications, because I saw prescription medications as being a wrong trade. I see prescription medications as being necessary in some cases to save your life and to stabilize things for you. And I'm very, very thankful for medicine and having prescriptions. But I really, really wanted to get free of any connection with the pharmaceutical companies and so on. And when you look at what I have gotten free of and what I still am waiting on, anything that had to do with prescription medication, I'm free of, and something like prescription eyeglasses I still have. So the point being, I got free of what I wanted to get free of, what I most desired to get free of.
And how long's that been now?
Over a year.
So it's a great testimony of how it's not come back. Do you find you need to rule over that? Do you get any things threatening to come back? And
no, it's gone. And I mean, my eating was such a big issue of setting off reflux that I actually got down to being dangerously underweight. And at this point, I'm 20 pounds overweight, first time in my entire life, which my one doctor that I do go to is my once a year checkup with my primary care physician. And the doctor agrees with me. He'd rather see me this way than I was when I was dangerously thin. So really,
Yeah,
really
awesome, awesome testimonies. Yeah, awesome.
yeah.
And I too have had for years and years I had a trapped nerve with disintegrated discs and awful lot of pain down my legs, back spasms. It was really, really a horrible season in my life, maybe 6 years, and I started with a whole series of back spasms again after a period. And this was maybe a year and a half ago, where I was really into a lot of these heavenly healing methods and was seeking to apply them and coming out of agreement with that. And before I knew it, everything just disappeared. I was getting all sorts of terrible, like, heat pains down the legs, which I'd never had prior. And I actually went for because I'd had an MRI confirming disintegrated discs and trapped nerve. And when that happens, the disintegrated discs they don't pop back. They've disintegrated and that's it. And I went for another MRI, and the scan said there was no evidence of disintegrated discs, which is an absolute miracle. It's a creation, really, of new reformed discs. And yeah, it's been wonderful since then. And that's, oh yes, I've had chronic neck pains my whole life, really, since I was 30, with arthritis. And I went for a MRI of my neck, and the guy said, "You've got nothing showing really of any concern." And for my age now, I'm coming up for 60. He said, your neck's in very good shape. I mean, I was really, really shocked. I was absolutely shocked. Yeah, so that's, and I also had some other issues, and I was concerned I got some serious thing going on. I had an MRI of the brain, and that came up completely healthy as well. Yeah, so I walked away. I had these issues, and I was going for tests for all sorts of horrible diseases or operations, and I walked away with nothing.
Awesome.
They couldn't find anything wrong with me. Yeah, that was really awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't have a sense that it was a specific thing that I did or specific act of faith. I just, my sense for me anyway, Jane, is that it's just simply as a result of doing the journey.
Yeah, yeah, it was an ongoing thing. It wasn't like we just did a one, court case or a governmental act. I think it was an ongoing accumulation of all the things that we had been doing that caused, just massive improvement.
Yeah, my sense all along was that I had this thing that I was looking to have taken care of, but I was not going to allow it to be the emphasis of my relationship with the Lord or of my journey. In other words, my journey wasn't about seeking healing or health. My journey was about following the journey as it was presented to me, and my sense was that that the health would be along the way, and that's exactly what happened.
Awesome. So let's move on to the bigger picture of the scrolls we're seeing.
By the way, Jane, my sense is that this does involve the Scrolls Chancellor's House, and there are scrolls that are being made available today as part of what we're talking about here. You function in the Scroll Chancellor's House. I know you do. as chief chancellor, and I function in the scroll chancellor's house too. And I just have a sense that scrolls are being handed out today as we're talking. So if you
That's
see
so
the scroll, take
exciting.
it, receive it.
That's really, really exciting. Yeah. So that really means people have to really receive this. Don't just file it as a nice, interesting talk. We always say this journey is about taking action. It's
Yeah.
responding the moment you hear something, act on it, come into agreement, try and do an encounter, and that way you won't get into overwhelm. If you just stack it up as another thing, you will just eventually get in so much overwhelm and you won't know where to start. So you have
Yeah.
to start the journey straight away. So
Respond.
the first point is a massive, massive one. That we're aware many know this scroll through the scriptures of freedom of the oppressed. But what we're seeing here is that the journey is really much bigger than that in terms of moving from slavery to freedom into the promised land. And so that's why a lot of the story in the Old Testament is actually relevant for us now, spiritually, because the promised land is new heaven and new earth. And it's not something when we die, it's for right now. We can access, we can live out this, we can live in the promises. We are seated in heavenly realms. We're not even just going in and out. We just can live there 24/7 and walk with Jesus in the garden, in constant union and oneness. It's just the most glorious future that's available to us right now. And the slavery, we realize, has come into so many forms. You know, it's one buying into death and sickness, but also slavery to all sorts of institutions, financial institutions, political, economic, military systems that have in some way made us slaves. And we're seeing that this agenda is coming forth right now with the virus. We're realizing how much of an agenda there can be of our slavery and being used for bigger picture agendas that others have chosen, often without us being aware of it.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say?
I was listening to I've shared this on the Facebook Live, I think, or at least in recording anyway, listening to what's coming over the TV, and it was kept on saying we're all in this together, and something in my spirit just rose up and said, well, you can be if you want to be, but I'm not going to be in this together with you. I refuse to be in that together. Not that I'm not going to be part of the community and help out, but I'm just not going to jump into that with you. You can be there if you want to, but I don't want to be there. The glorious freedom of the sons of God is the highest, biggest picture of freedom and patience. I think it was along the way. One of our folks in OUB House saw 12 laws of freedom. There's the gospel does include a major emphasis on freedom. It's not just freedom from, it's freedom to, and sonship. Glorious freedom of the sons of God is the highest blueprint for freedom.
Yeah, so awesome. So awesome that, isn't it?
That's a scroll you can receive right there.
Yeah.
I want that.
Well, the next one is coming out of Babylon, but I sort of mentioned that earlier, really, those four spirits. There's so much in coming out of Babylon, but we have to realize that not all institutions will carry on like they are. That was never the plan. And so we have to expect some disintegration in some things. We're not just bringing Christian values into existing systems, which may be corrupt in the first place. So a lot of heard the term draining the swamp and things. There's all or resets. There's all sorts of resets, I think, at the moment, and we can govern over these spiritually in the most profound way to bring these on an earlier time frame for us. If we don't, I see a lot of these things, they'll still happen, but they will be generations probably of lower blueprint, of suffering, of maybe slavery, if our generation doesn't choose to take these up right now. The next one is the new wineskin, the ecclesia. What do you want to bring out there, Bill? On
Well, a major part of the new wineskin is family. As soon as we began functioning with groups, as soon as I began functioning with groups, I immediately began saying, we are family. It just came right out of me instinctively. We are family. But there are various levels of wineskin, and there's a journey up into highest form and function of the ecclesia, and major part of what I see is Father, Son, Father, Son, Father, Son, passed down from generation to generation to generation, restoration of the Father-Son relationship and restoration of generations in the ecclesia. So instead of everybody starting with a brand new, fresh beginning at generation one, which is what much of us do. I mean, American dream, I think, for many folks is going to school or getting a job, and each of us, the job that we get, each of us starts fresh at a beginning, from the very beginning again, instead of building generationally, where you can be the third or fourth person in line, and you've got the benefit of the generations that are ahead of you, instead of each generation having to make a fresh new start from the very beginning. I see that as something that the ecclesia has done for thousands of years. Each new generation starts at a beginning instead of starting where the last generation left off and picking up where they left off and continuing on from there. And that's the benefit of Father, Sons, and generations.
That's really, really good. Yeah, and we've seen there's an awareness now of understanding the difference from church to the ecclesia, and how that has massive implications for the structure of our organizations. Well, we say we don't become an organization, really. We're an organism, a live morphing organism that's constantly changing, morphing. So we change a lot at One United Body, and we don't have any assets, any salaries, nothing that's going to slow us down or be a burden. And we have many pages on transitioning to the new wineskin that will show you the big picture of how to do the ecclesia differently from church. It takes quite a shock sometimes, and sometimes you feel like you're giving up everything, community. Well, even if you've been a pastor as well, you may even be called to give up that traditional type of congregation. But there is so many new opportunities that no one is ever giving up anything, really. You're getting back so much more, and you're getting back this most wonderful contribution in the destiny. We have done the biggest mandates you could possibly imagine in oneness with Yeshua, and it's been the most glorious destiny. And we've seen several types of wineskins, and this is why the wineskins always have to keep morphing. It's never completed at the New Testament. Jesus said there were many wineskins, and we called them the new, the true, the living, the everlasting, and the free wineskins. And a lot of that is about the journey, understanding the spiritual city of Zion, and also the spiritual city of everlasting, and becoming everlasting Father. So that's why there's the everlasting wineskin. The living wineskin, how would you describe that, Bill? Did we really categorize that as a different one or part of everlasting?
No, but thinking about it right now, it's going to have to do with the way, the truth, and the life. And we've seen that after we become a living sacrifice, at the point at which we experience a resurrection into life, there's that you have to die to live thing that's so clear in the gospel. I mean, Jesus' example was very clear in that too. The dying to self in order to live. Um, so
Yeah, so
yeah,
becoming life, really, isn't it? In the full river of life, and
yeah,
everything that we realize what that means now is
yep, yep,
immense and many, many levels, and how we can really be, Jesus is I am the resurrection and the life. Those are the names we can take on. That's so exciting. And
yeah,
then the free wine skin is
yeah. Free,
probably really just living out of everything.
yeah, glorious freedom of the
Uh,
sons of God that I was referring to before.
yeah, yeah, everything that every single promise that is our inheritance right now. This is why the looking for the big picture is so important, because you don't want to settle for a much lower blueprint and not reap the greater destiny.
Yeah,
The world will suffer from that, and you will too. And we call it taking camp, or not deploying too early, where you see something and then suddenly build a ministry right around that one thing. We've found we've had to constantly change, and so all our things that we do are very flexible, and we don't spend, inordinate amount of time producing books, materials, conferences. We're very quick. We do quick Facebook Lives, quick pages, a lot of encounters to make sure we're actually doing governmental acts and not just talking about these things. And as an element of freedom now, that the technology has allowed this amount of freedom with a lot less preparation.
yeah.
So
As far as father son, every father deserves full freedom for their sons.
yeah, yeah. So another one we've got is bringing all the tribes, both Jew and Gentile, into one great holy nation, Israel.
Yeah, one
Um, as
great
as
holy
New
nation, Israel. Yeah, 5 names.
as New Jerusalem and New Earth. Why are we Israel, Bill?
We've seen that Jacob became Israel at the point at which he became an overcomer. And the scripture where it speaks about Bethel, where he puts his head on the rock and he wakes up and dreams, the next morning wakes up from the dream and says, how awesome is this place. This is none other than the house of God. Um, Jacob had his name changed from Jacob to Israel, and then his 12 sons were the sons of Israel, not just the sons of Jacob. The 12 sons of Israel become the nation of Israel. So this generational thing from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, who became Israel, to his 12 sons, and then finally to Joseph, who is ruler on the throne of Egypt. Um, the Israel comes in there with overcoming, and there's much to overcome. I mean, there's wrong trading, there's self government, and various other things to overcome. But the point at which we become an overcomer is the point at which we become Israel. Paul said, "Not all Israel is Israel," and Gentiles actually become Israel when they become overcomers. The key thing about Israel is it's meant to be a nation of overcomers. Overcomers.
Yeah, so we're not saying we go back to following Jewish traditions, festivals, and we've talked a lot about finding a tribe, and all the tribes being united as one holy nation, Israel, in New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So finding a tribe doesn't mean that you have to go and follow all the Jewish traditions. It's just that we are all originated from something in the past. And it was just a theme in the Old Testament that was to show us the pattern for the spiritual version in the future.
Yeah.
Um,
Each of the
but
gates of New Jerusalem has the name of a tribe on it as well.
Yes, and that's the key point as to why we're seeing it's a future thing. We're going forward, we're not going back. But we do recognize there is value in learning some of the Hebrew culture that we've missed from the Greek culture, and some of the value of understanding the Hebrew language that gives far more detailed understanding than the English language. But we personally, in this house, have found we have learned a few things, but we found we get an awful lot from encounter at any rate. So we haven't felt the need to go into huge depths with the Hebrew language, but we do still recognize that's very valid and honor it, and there's an awful lot to come out from that. It can just be quite challenging, I think, to learn Hebrew, but there are other ways. So not we don't have to do the journey that way. There's the other one is love. Love is the overriding blueprint, really. And we must remember that in everything we do here, we talk a lot about kings, and we can easily get into just governing over world problems. And we're seeing that there's a bigger agenda than world problems currently. But if everything we do on this journey does not have love as its characteristic, and we're moving away from each other every time we trigger over doctrine or any higher blueprint that anyone says, then we're really not moving towards the one united body agenda and the full becoming love. So that's why it's important to recognize when you trigger, not move away, but press in. In fact, you really want to be in a community that challenges you immensely. If you're just listening over and over to things that you've already bought into, that can cause you to stagnate, really, or get a false sense of security that you're doing something, but you actually want to be challenged in the areas that are your weakness. Anything you want to say on love or immortality is the next one?
I was going to say that oneness and love, I think, go together. And oneness involves overcoming separation, and separation is death. So the presence of separation in an ecclesia or between ecclesias is evidence of the presence of death.
Yes, yeah, and possibly also self-government, self-ego.
Yeah.
And we've seen how that comes in massively still in the new wineskin, and the challenge of being able to dialogue with people who may not, who may see the blueprint slightly differently is huge. And to what extent are we going to listen to each other, or just both all speak our, I'm hearing this from God, I don't really care what you're saying, I'm hearing this from God, which is not how one united body works together. We all care what each other says, we listen, we say, have we missed anything we need to learn, do we need to humble ourselves? And then we can actually engage and learn from each other, instead of all just trying to preach at each other different messages. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered immortality. We're seeing that part of the gospel, not dying, having a new resurrected body, living out of our spirit on the outside instead of the spirit on the inside, almost becoming like a glowing light, really. We arise and we shine, and we declare our light. We become light, like Jesus is the light of the world. And when we have that immense frequency and through us, then the body can stop that decay, and we trade out of choosing to accept death as our destiny. And there's also evidence where in the new church, the early church, they were transfigured, they were disappearing, all sorts of things that we've really just missed in our attempt to understand what the Gospels were in the recent decades. And all these are coming to light, how we are really we're on a journey of uncovering the hidden. Yeah, a lot of hidden truths that have got lost.
Yep.
Oh, and also we should say in this, the book of Enoch was taken out of the scriptures. We believe that was a mistake. And if the book of Enoch had been in there, there would have been a whole different understanding of what the blueprint was about, being a believer. Overcoming's the next one, Bill.
Key to everything. There's before overcoming and there's after overcoming. Overcoming itself is a journey as well. I mean, it begins by seeing yourself as an overcomer, and then you journey through progressively overcoming various things. The revelation of Jesus Christ is the revelation of Jesus as the overcoming king. Christ is king, right? So take a look at chapters 2 and 3 of the Revelation, and take a look at the 7 letters there. Each letter ends with, "To him who overcomes, I will give," or something close to that. And there's a list of things that are promised to those who overcome. Anything that has a 7 involved with it has a first and a last. The 7th is the last. The first is the beginning. The 7th is the end. And it's a journey from 1 through 7. So those 7 ecclesias is a journey into overcoming. You'll find the word overcome in the revelation of Jesus Christ repeatedly. And then the verse that I really enjoy the most is the last one towards the end of the revelation of Jesus Christ, where it says, "To him who overcomes, I will give to inherit all." To him who overcomes, I will give to inherit all. That's quite a promise to motivate us to go the full journey of overcoming.
Yes, and we're seeing that in so many concepts. There is 2 truths that look opposing that are true. And this is a huge part of the big picture, and it can knock you off. But if you can just remember that principle, the Hebrew culture, you can have 2 principles that look opposing that run in parallel. And so that applies with overcoming. We've overcome through Yeshua, but we're also on a journey of overcoming.
Yeah. The identity as an overcomer comes to us because we're one with Yeshua as an overcomer, or as the overcomer is probably a better way to say it. So overcoming is a name that's given to us because we're one with Yeshua. But it's also something that's a journey that from beginning to end. By the way, another word for overcome is victory. Another word is conquer. So victorious, conquer, overcomer, three ways of saying the same thing.
Yes, huge part of the journey, that overcoming in many, many aspects.
Yeah.
The part of the other thing is bringing in the barley and the wheat harvest, and what are some of the end points, the tipping points to bring in new earth? That's huge. So that's why we see understanding the book of Revelation is very important, that it wasn't just finished with certain aspects of history are done, but there are multiple contexts in which these principles still apply to each generation. And there are certain things that need to be done to bring in that tipping point of new earth. And until they're completed, we will not see the, the end of things as we know it. So that is why you have to get into and look deeper. If people say the book of Revelation is complete, we find that as in oneness with Yeshua, we have to know how to be all those positions that he does in that book. He's the great harvester with his sickle. He's riding the white horse of victory with the iron rod. All these have huge, huge implications for how we can have encounters in heaven in these governmental positions as kings, of King of Kings, Lord of Lords. We're on a journey for that. We're also on a journey to become priests, high priests, the great high priest. And this is where the order of Melchizedek comes in. And so all these things are a part of the journey. And you may be saying, well, at this point, how on earth could I cope with all these? Well, you cope with all these blueprints because you do them in accelerated ways, quicker ways, and you move and you morph to different functions. So you don't make a ministry out of one thing, or just say, well, okay, you know, doing court cases is my destiny, my scroll. I'll just spend years doing court cases for this particular scroll, because all scrolls merge. And that's why it can be quite overwhelming. But once you get into the pattern that you can do something and then you move on, but you want to do quite a few mandates in a particular function. You don't want to step into one name, do one thing, one position. Okay, I've done one thing as a king. Now I'm going to move on and never do anything else. There's got to be a personal journey of a lot of mandates privately. But then there comes a point when the emphasis is changed and you choose a different name to step into and learn to function in a different way. So that's another part of the big picture, is becoming all the names that Yeshua is. And there's a lot of names. So the quicker you step into a spiritual name for yourself and then use it to direct your journey, the more you will accelerate. And if you struggle hearing any name, we've had revelation. It's completely okay to choose any of the names that Yeshua has and begin functioning. The most important thing is you begin practicing these things, not waiting and waiting for God to reveal it when you're ready. He's waiting for you to take up your authority. Where are we? You said, finding your tribe. Do we need to say any more on that, Bill? Briefly.
Well, the key thing is there's a need to join a family, to join a tribe. I just watch so many folks in Heavenly Realms, and my sense is that they're watching from the highest seats in the stadium they're kind of sitting on the fence at the highest possible place I'm not really sure where I fit, where I belong. I'm watching this, I'm testing it out. There's a need to dive in there and become a part of a particular stream, of a part of a particular family, of a part of a particular tribe. My sense is that there will be at some point 12 tribes in the universal ecclesia, and 12 tribes become one nation. It may be the kind of thing where there's more than 12, but initially there'll be 12. And there's a need to find out where you fit and get started. You're not going to find out where you fit if you don't get started somewhere. What I'm trying to say is you don't want to spend a whole lot of time choosing where you fit. You want to get in there and get going. Once you've committed to something, I mean, once you've begun to build relationships, that is where you belong. You know, 2 years into a relationship is not the time to go looking for a new tribe.
Yes, and many people are very into nations, doing governmental actions for their nations. But what we're seeing is that all the nations become the spiritual one holy nation and reunited in New Jerusalem. So if you begin to encounter New Jerusalem, you will see a lot more of the bigger picture than trying to solve the problems of your nation. It will really help you see what the whole scriptures was about in many of the books, and Abram going and on a spiritual journey to find the spiritual city. So this helps us because we call it redeeming an old mountain. That if everything is going to work with new principles and new things, there is a limit to what we want, the limit to the value of solving too many smaller problems at a lower blueprint level. So we've all had to move on. I was doing a lot of problems of the world with encounter groups, and I had to just disintegrate them and move on. And in the end, we've just found just having encounter group benches with no real specific agenda, we just go where Father leads us, and he's led us through a deeper understanding of all these aspects. That's all you need, really. It's just a bench that's on this spiritual journey, not a bench for this problem or this nation or that.
And my sense has been for quite a while now that you have a need to maintain the peace in your local area so that you're able to do what you're supposed to be doing. But there's no need to do too much beyond keeping things peaceful in your area so that you're able to do what you're supposed to be doing. You don't have to fix absolutely everything. Of course, you do have to keep things to the point that your neighborhood is safe, that your area is safe so that you are able to function, I do see that as a priority, but fixing the entire nation, I don't see as being a priority.
We've had a lot of revelation recently about building the temple corporately and individually as us, the body, our physical body is the temple. And we've had revelation on the difference between creating and making all things new. Yeah. Well, actually, no, we should say we realized that revelation on the restoration of all things was deeper and a little bit more complex than that it was the restoration of all names and not the restoration of all things. And some of the things are actually some, in the terms all can actually mean some. Or it can mean the restoration of all, but not the restoration of all things. Yep. So it has a completely different spin on it when you really get to a deeper analysis of those scriptures.
Yeah, I'm really strongly drawn to that phrase in the Revelation of Jesus Christ where it says, where the Lord God Almighty says, "Behold, I make all things new." And what he's saying is, watch me do this, because this is what I want you to do. I want you to make all things new. Now, that word thing is not there in the original. It's supplied by the translator. So it's, "Behold, I make all new." And I think they put the word thing in there because they're asking the question, all what? And my answer to that is, in Genesis chapter 1, on the first day, God created the heaven and the earth. And on days 2 through 6, he made. And at the end of those 6 days, it says he rested from all that he created and made. So the summary of everything done in the first 6 days is creating or making. Creating and making is a summary of that. So everything he did during those 6 days was either something he created or something that he made. And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I see days 2 through 6 as being making, not creating. And so at the end of the book, when the Lord God Almighty says, "Behold, I make all new," I believe he's talking about those things from the first 6 days of creation. They're being made new. And that actually we are to make them new. my sense is that heaven and earth is both a physical heaven and a physical earth, but it's also us, that in our makeup, we are both heaven and earth. And we have a heaven function and an earth function. And we need to make ourselves new. So that's cutting edge discovery where we are, where I am right now, is functioning in making new. So that's why Jane's talking about not fixing an old mountain. I mean, if you're going to make it new, you don't really need to fix it completely. You need to keep it patched up enough that we can live in peace. But in the end, we're going to make it new rather than fix it.
Awesome, awesome. I'm just conscious we've given an awful lot, so we should probably just skip very quickly through a couple of others. One is destiny, helping people with their destiny scrolls, and also taking on all the Chancellor's House's functions. We've found as well, it's not one specific one, and it's not that you become a Chancellor and then you sort of move on and you never go back to them. They have a very key role in, again, understanding the big blueprint, because we see how much legislation and laws are part of it, how much scrolls, mantles, commissioning, and again, understanding your well, the affairs of the nations is one. So again, that's kind of like how to apply things to the current timeline.
Yeah, the ones that I've functioned recently have been commissioning and mantles, putting mantles on people and then commissioning them. The function in a Chancellor's House is you go to receive, so you go to the Scroll Chancellor's House to receive scrolls. At a later point, you're sitting down on those 12 seats there and you're actually handing out scrolls. And then at a later point, you're actually training people and functioning in the Chancellor's Houses. What I would encourage everyone to do is be part of an encounter group that goes and looks at each one of those Chancellor's Houses. One encounter per Chancellor's House is a very, very profitable discovery encounter for an encounter group or for a bench. You can do that personally as well, but I did it as part of a encounter group, visiting each of the 12 initially, and then I began, at a later point, got the revelation about those 3 levels of function and started functioning in some of the Chancellor's Houses in much more personal function there. And my belief is that we will come to a place of functioning in all 12. They're part of our tutoring, part of our training up, part of our equipping also.
Yeah. Yeah, and justice is another one, and that's why engaging all the 12 cities or the 12 strands of DNA is really a part of the big picture as well. And justice, judgment, justice, and holiness are key concepts to grapple with in the big picture, as is fathering nations. So we're seeing really that everyone is called to fathering at some point, and well, I would even say to begin discipling the moment you become a believer. It's not for when you've got all this information behind you. The moment you've got something, you give it away. Then it becomes part of your DNA of discipling. And it's not this sort of I need to learn, which is is not the principle of heaven of giving and receiving. It's just take, lack, I need to learn, and that's really not the essence of the Gospels and the Scriptures. Preaching the everlasting gospel. I mean, we've got to remember as well that we're still, evangelism, reaching out has always been part of the big picture, but we can do it in an accelerated way of preaching the everlasting gospel. And we're often calling people into New Jerusalem, or calling them into a tribe through a particular gate. It is a new accelerated form of evangelism. And you're becoming an everlasting father there. So it's a part of fathering as well. So it's so important that we keep doing that, and see that as your role when you become part of a tribe. You help gather the scattered children. You don't leave it up to a few founders to do. We all take part in that, and then we can bring people in a viral way. If it's just to a few people, it's very hard to gather the scattered children. It's very important to understand your role. So sharing pages, sharing recordings is really important, and seeing a mandate to share those as well. Discovery. Bill, anything you want to say quickly on discovery?
Well, yeah, our whole journey has been discovery. I mean, discovery is going out to sea, and like Columbus, Magellan, or astronauts going to the moon. Everything we've done has been a matter of going out and finding out what's there by looking and having an encounter. So discovery is the process of receiving revelation. And this is the beauty of encounter groups or benches functioning as a team, as a family, in seeing and hearing and doing discovery together. I love functioning as a bench, going and looking at something we haven't seen before, and then dialoguing about what we're seeing and coming to an understanding about what is being revealed to us and what that means about our identity and our function. Everything here that we're talking about is coming out of that process of discovery.
Yes, and just having asking a lot of questions, it opens up. And we've found that if the more you hunger for answers to certain questions, the more you'll get the revelation. If you don't have the questions, Father often won't give you the revelation, and then you get into the trap of, well, I'm not getting a lot, but you haven't initiated the hunger. The hunger is like a door. And one of the big new revelations we're getting is the importance of being a son in a house, as opposed to just being part of the flock of sheep. I won't say too much on that, but just keep that in mind as well. Who you honor as a father, who you give credit to as a father. Are you only giving it to the Godhead as your father, or are you willing to honor just men made perfect, or far living fathers on the earth now? Because we're seeing again that it's just so much part of being one body. We don't just give the honor to heavenly hosts. I think that's probably enough for today.
Oh, yeah.
Did you say, Bill? Yeah. You may want to re-listen to this just to really get in your spirit, because what we're doing here is we're sowing seeds, and then your journey will water them. And so don't be overwhelmed, because sowing seeds of the big picture will keep you on the narrow path, stop you taking camp. We've got many chat groups that you can do daily discipling with people and build community and get pages posted there that people post from seeing mandates of what God wants to share right now. If you want to join that, just message our Heavenly Realms Facebook page. And our Patreon has a lot more detail on some of these big picture issues. So if you sign up for a small fee, you can access the website pages and a lot of new material we're putting on Patreon that's only there and nowhere else. So do consider that. It's also a way of supporting this work and not assuming that all this work can just carry on without the collective supporting it, really. The culture of heaven is that you trade and leverage in the order of Melchizedek. You get leverage from trading, and positive trading is by giving and sowing financially and also your time. It's not the principle that all revelation should be free and you just turn up and listen and take everything and don't share and don't don't give. If the body works with giving and receiving, the whole thing flows, and revelation can come back to being free. But if the body doesn't do that, it blocks it, and it causes this sort of scenario that you have to teach the sons the mature principles of trading and leverage. Anything you want to say to finish, Bill?
Well, just the central importance of becoming part of an encounter group. Strongly encourage people to dive in and visit an encounter group, to experience that and find out that you do see and hear, and you are able to function and flow in it just like the other folks are. You'll find recordings, but it's best to actually be there and participate live and become part of an encounter group, part of a bench.
Awesome. Thank you ever so much, everyone, and thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Jane.
And,
thanks, everybody.
oh yeah, we're starting intensive next week, so anyone is still able to join quickly at this point. Just message our page if you want to know the agendas on the Facebook page. And it's just 5 weeks for the next 5 weeks.
Okay, turn recording off.